Welcome to Monday through Friday, Cellular Agriculture for a Pandemic-Free Future. This is episode number 19. My name is George Ortega. It is August 2nd, 2020 at 9:19 a.m. Eastern. And I want to start by kind of emphasizing why it's so important to transition from farming, eating animals to cellular agriculture from the standpoint of being pandemic-free as much as possible. Because the only other option that is available to us is for us to develop universal vaccines or a universal vaccine. And that means that, we have vaccines against, for example, we have certain vaccines against the flu, influenza vaccines, and we take them each year because they kind of like determine during the first 6 months of that year which influenza viruses they predict are going to be most prevalent that year, and they kind of like concoct a variety of vaccines in one to address the ones that are most likely. Even with that though, they're only about 60% effective on average, which is an extreme limitation. So like with the universal vaccine, they'd need to, the problem is that they would need to create a vaccine that works with all the strains. I mean, like there's influenza, but then there's also like Ebola, there's SARS, there's MERS, there's Zika virus, there's different viruses that aren't necessarily influenza. And then on top of that, you have the bacterial epidemics, like the plague was not a virus, it was a bacteria. So on top of that, again, they just started working on universal vaccines around 12 years ago in 2008. And I think there may be one or two companies now that are in trials, that are in clinical trials to see the effectiveness of them. And again, I've read that they want to have an effectiveness of at least 80%, which it's got to be really hard because even with today's yearly flu vaccines, it's 60%, and it's lower sometimes for people, let's say over 60, it could be as low as 30%. So that's a major problem that they're not 95%, because you get a very contagious kind of a virus, and it spreads, and I'm not even sure that 80% would be enough to keep us as protected as we'd want to be. So, first it's the difficulty of creating universal vaccines, but it's the difficulty obtaining the desirable degree of effectiveness, and along with the difficulty of creating these vaccines, it may take 10, 15, 20 years for us to have them. Whereas if we invest in cellular agriculture and clean meat, we could have these products available in 2-3 years in supermarkets and restaurants. So what I want to do now is address this time frame criteria. Why I don't think it's so wise for us to count on these universal vaccines, and why it's important to recognize that waiting for 10, 15, 20 years for a universal vaccine may be like playing with fire, maybe just like such a risky kind of thing to do. I want to share my screen with you. I want to show you exactly what I mean with this. If I can find it, where is it? Major pandemics. All right, let's see. All right, so if you can see this, and I'll try to make it a bit larger for you. So basically, you know, we have, whoa. All right, we've had these plagues, you know, epidemics, pandemics in the past. You know, you go back to 165 AD, you know, 5 million people died. This is a bacterial plague. Well, actually, no, smallpox or measles. And you had smallpox, you have different ones. All right, so like, you know, a million, what, 500-600 years later or so. Look at this, 30 to 50 million in 541. You have like a lot of, you know, 15, 20, 56 million. It was a virus. So, all right, so you have these, but like, you know, through the centuries, there aren't all that many of them, okay? But now come to, for example, let's go into the, starting with 1800s, okay? We've got this cholera pandemic in the early 1800s, right? Killed about 1 million plus. Then it was, and that was like during a long period, because a lot of, like, for example, like AIDS, HIV, has been killing, you know, people starting in the 80s, probably before that, of course, and, you know, it's over 20 million people. So like some of these are much faster, like in 1885, you know, you have the plague, it was a bacterial, 12 million people. So, all right, so like, you know, in the 1800s, there were 1, 2, 3, 4 influenza in the entire 1800s. Then you go to the 1900s. You have this major one, which is the wake-up call. It should have been a wake-up call to everyone, the Spanish flu. And, you know, just, it wasn't that it came from Spain. I just wanted to clarify this. Basically, that was like during World War I. And Spain was, didn't take part in that war. It was neutral. So basically, while the other countries censored their news, they didn't report this flu, you know, which made it, of course, much more dangerous and lethal. And Spain, which was, you know, neutral during the war, didn't have that censorship. And it was the first, you know, the first reports of the flu came from Spain. That's why it's called the Spanish flu. So anyway, so like, so that was a virus, you know, 40 to 50. Actually, more recent estimates put it at between 50 and 100 million people. But the point in the whole, so you had like 4 in the 1800s, you look to the 1900s, and you've got 4, okay? You know, like, you know, spread like, you know, all right, from 1920 to almost 60, that's like 40 years, and 10 years later you have another one, and then 10 years later you have AIDS. So, and again, like this Asian flu, 57 killed 1 million. We're I think, you know, coronaviruses, I think COVID-19 has killed maybe 500,000 so far, but these are major events, and you see. So now let's look at the 20s. Like again, 4 in the 1800s, 4 in the 1900s. We're only in the first 20 years of the 2000s. Already we've got swine flu, SARS, Ebola, MERS, COVID-19. And again, and they're increasing. Okay, that's the point I want to make here. So I'm stopping the share. They're increasing in frequency. And it's not, you know, it's not a mystery as to why. You know, for example, like there are many, many more people on the planet. We've transitioned from local family farming to factory farming. A major factor is we are so much more mobile now. You know, back then, you know, they didn't do much traveling. You know, that's why viruses were easier to contain. Now, 4 billion passenger flights every year, you know, and you know, no continent is exempt. I mean, they're Africa, Asia, South America, North America, Europe. I mean, people fly everywhere. And that is why, the prevalence that these viruses are becoming more frequent is why we need to act fast. I mean, think about it. I mean, if we're so reckless, so indifferent, so careless as to come out of this distancing, this coronavirus pandemic, and not do as much as we can, as much as we should do to prevent future pandemics, to give us a fighting chance. I'm not sure, from a certain kind of like a moral standpoint, we deserve to exist. A human population is just so careless with human life. I mean, so like, God willing, we will understand this. We will understand that yes, we have an amazingly wonderful way to be perhaps 95, 99% free of pandemics. If we transition, let's say in 2-3 years, let's say we invest, what I've been suggesting, $50 billion, which is 1/2 of what the Congressional Budget Office has estimated we're going to be spending on this pandemic, $8 trillion. So if we spend 1/2 of 1% on that, of that 50 billion, and start spending it as soon as Biden gets into office, okay? In 2 years, 3 years perhaps, we could have all the beef, chicken, pork, seafood, dairy products, eggs that we want, in a way that keeps us as pandemic free as I believe we need to be, certainly as so we'd have to, at that point, obviously, end the farming of animals. That's the only way we're really going to be safe from these things until we get a vaccine. The problem is, of course, the vaccines are, years, decades more likely away. So think about it. Think about it. I've mentioned this before. People spend 7 times more than what I'm suggesting to protect their houses from theft and fire and other damage and loss, over a 10-year period. So $50 billion to keep us as safe as we can be from a future pandemic is an amazing bargain. And if our politicians don't understand this, we really need some more intelligent, better politicians. And the media is the same, that the media isn't reporting this, that you have to hear this on a local cable television, series is bizarre. You're not hearing this from the news organizations, which demonstrates their profound irresponsibility. They're corporations. They're not really concerned so much, it seems, with the welfare of the planet, welfare of people, as much as they're concerned with ratings and with their business model and returning, gains to their shareholders. That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. Even like, the public PBS, public broadcasting service, it doesn't, it's not informing people about this. I mean, it could be, could it be that it's too early, in terms of prudence, in terms of, responsibility, no, we should have started this in January, to pump this $50 billion into the ground. Waiting is playing with fire. So like, this is not too early, but in the minds of some of these reporters, some of these news organizations, some of these politicians, perhaps, if any of them really, have this, knowledge, perhaps, they're thinking more politically. And so in that case, perhaps they're believing that it's too early. So let's hope let's hope that maybe next year, by next summer, as we're hopefully moving away from this, we don't know. This distancing, it may be a back and forth that goes for 2, 3, 4 years. That's what experts tell us. But at a certain point, after $8 trillion has been spent, after so many people have died, after so much loss in so many ways, so much economic loss, people are hopefully going to really be very eager to not go through this again. People are really going to be wanting some kind of assurance from our governments, from our scientists, that we can be protected, from future pandemics. But again, it's because the universal vaccines are 10, perhaps 15 years away, and they'd have to apply to like influenza, to other viruses, to bacterial infections. It may be longer than 15, 20 years. I don't know. But it's because of that great uncertainty and the great difficulty in doing that research that we only really have one reasonable option of being safe from pandemics, and that is to end the farming and eating of animals. I'm not saying ending the eating of beef, of meat and dairy and seafood and all. We can still eat those foods because of cellular agriculture. But we will absolutely have to end farming animals throughout the entire world, not just here in the United States, if we have any reasonable chance of being safe from future pandemics. The other, I think, major thing we're going to have to do, and this is, a bit of a side point to the series, but are tearing down the Amazon rainforest. The forests are encroaching more and more into wildlife, just like civilization just encroaching more into wilderness. That's a major source of pandemics. So at a certain point, we're going to have to start thinking, well, we've encroached into the wild, into nature enough, and if we need to expand, we'd better figure out how to expand up, skyscrapers, just vertically instead of taking more land. And incidentally, we will have a lot more land available once we make this transition from the farming of animals to growing our meat, fish, dairy products in labs or, through cellular agriculture. The reason being is that most of our land, our farmland that grows food, is not used for human beings. Most of that land is used for the feed that cows and chickens and pigs eat on these farms. So think about it. We no longer have to eat, have to farm these animals. All of that land, it's a lot of land, becomes available for human use and, for other ways, parks, whatever. So, all right. So again, I've been kind of giving sermons recently, just like, saying how evil we are. And well, you guys, I'm like, people who are not vegan, and like, I make it a point to say, well, it's not really your fault because, you don't have a free will. You just are going along with what the world is doing, just like in the time of slavery, people were, well, everybody else is like, thinks slavery is all right. It must be all right. So, yeah, I mean, that's an important point. And I'll come back to this because I think it is very important. You've got this information, but I think it's only going to be useful to you, important to you, to the extent that you blend it in with the morality aspect. I mean, I imagine you consider yourself a good person, you value morality. 80, 90% of you believe in God or higher power. So it's not like you don't care about, being a good person. But all of that morality aside, from a completely practical standpoint, it is just the height of folly for us to keep going month by month, like we're into August already, and nobody, the media, the politicians are not talking about ending these pandemics or being as safe as possible. Think about it. Think about it. I mean, we have to get into the politics of this. I mean, like we think we have a democracy. We don't have a democracy here in the United States. What we have is a plutocracy, or more specifically, a corporatocracy, meaning that it's the corporations who call the shots. The rich, plutocracy is like ruled by the rich. So that's our problem, because the rich, they've done a lot of good. You can't, lump them all together and say they're all evil, but they tend to not be concerned with the general welfare, unless it's like, to add customers to their base, whatever. So what's happening is, somebody goes to a politician and they say, well, listen, they explain exactly what I've been explaining to you right now. We need to end the farming of animals. And let's say this politician happens to be in a Midwestern state that raises a lot of cattle and chicken and pigs. Okay, well, these corporations, Cargill and Purdue, there's various, very large corporations that will pay these politicians millions and millions of dollars in campaign financing, and so they, to a great extent, own these politicians. These politicians will say, well, you make a lot of sense. It would be great if we could prevent future pandemics. But you see, for me to get reelected, I have to listen to what my financiers are telling me that I need to do. And, perhaps that's a bit too direct, but that is exactly what happens. In so many cases, politicians are not doing what is right or what the people would like them to do, the will of the people. They're doing the will of their financiers for campaigns. And we might as well get into the politics, because the politics is so important. So basically, one answer to this is, right now we have, by law, we allow this. We have to change the law. We have to change the law where a person runs for office and they get, for example, a certain number of signatures. We, the public, finance their campaign. And let's say there are 4 people running for a certain office. On the primaries, whatever, you've got 2 running for an office in the national elections, right? Well, each of those 2 candidates is allotted only a certain amount. You can't spend unlimited. You can't spend hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in advertising all this stuff. And the person who recruits the most contributors wins. No, they're allowed enough to communicate their platform effectively, and it's fairer, and that way, and what I'm describing is referred to as federally financed campaign finance reform, publicly financed elections. Okay. So basically what happens is their election funds, campaigning funds, would come from taxes, and, would probably want to tax the rich a bit more than everyone else because they have the money, and, they're the reason why we're in this mess, and to a great extent. But that, we need to do this. I mean, if we have an epiphany, if we have a moral, a leap of conscience, if we, all of a sudden, become, because of this COVID-19, much, much better people, if we're chastened and understand that we just can't do whatever we want, without expecting to suffer sometimes dire consequences, perhaps there's a chance that we can keep our political, our campaign financing system the way it is. But, you know, unless we reach that, it's not just to prevent pandemics. I mean, we've got climate change. I mean, Gore's movie came out almost 16 years ago, 14 years ago, 2006. And people knew, you know, about climate change, global warming before that. And still, you know, the fossil fuel industry, the transportation industry, a lot of industries have conspired to prevent us from doing anything meaningful on it. So that's another powerful reason that we need to like change the way we elect our officials. And we need to it's essentially about getting money out of politics. I mean, you know, and you know, like some people like talk about freedoms. Well, no, freedoms, we are free to do what we want to the extent that it doesn't harm others. That's why there's so many laws against physical violence and theft and aggression and all that, right? And then there's, you know, sometimes we can hurt others through our speech. So there are hate crimes, there are speech laws. And now we have to understand that it is extremely hurtful to we as a global population, not just as a country, for a few very rich people to call the shots, you know, to not allow us to invest this $50 billion to create a pandemic-free future. You know, I mean, we're under 3 months into a national election. This is the time to talk about these kinds of things. You know, President Obama, he just recently suggested that, yeah, we may need to end the filibuster in the Senate. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very risky move because like the Republicans get in and, you know, they don't like government. So they probably, so basically we have to get in there, end that filibuster and then create a government, you know, that works for everyone, not for the corporations and can protect us. All right, we've got about 43 seconds left. Catch this on White Plains Community Media, channel 76 if you get Verizon, or if you get Optimum 45 if you get Verizon. It's on Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. It's also on YouTube. All right, well, so yeah, I'm not sure what I'll be talking about tomorrow, but again, you know, we need to invest in the cellular agriculture as our only real way of preventing future pandemics. Thanks for watching.